Close your eyes and feel the cold. Not just the winter chill you forget your gloves for, but real cold. 40 below zero. The wind bites into your face like 1,000 icy needles. Each breath burns your lungs, and your eyelashes freeze shut. Fingers lose sensation within minutes. Around you stretches an endless forest, snow reaching up to your hips. You're just a tiny dot in this endless white. Welcome to a journey through snow-covered forests of the 19th century, a time when survival was not guaranteed, but a daily battle against nature itself. But before we venture into this freezing world, make sure to hit the subscribe button. What you're about to learn will make you value your home's warmth, your soft bed, and simple life more. And leave a comment telling me what time of day you're watching this. Is it early morning, with you under a warm blanket learning about those who slept in icy tents? Or late evening, at home in the warmth, while frost may be forming outside your window? Are you in a cozy room, at a cafe, or riding through transport? I'm genuinely curious. Let's explore a world where each night might be your last. 200 years ago, at the start of the 19th century, winter travel through northern Russia, Canada, Alaska, or Scandinavia was no adventure for fun. It was a necessity. Fur traders moved goods from remote outposts to towns. Hunters ventured into the taiga for months, hunting sable, marten, and forest animals. Explorers charted unknown lands. Mail carriers carried letters and parcels over thousands of miles of wilderness. Indigenous peoples, Evans, Germans, Sami, Inuits, Athabascans, migrated following herds of reindeer or caribou. All faced one challenge: surviving the night as temperatures dropped, wind howled harder, and shelter was what you built. Let's begin this journey. Picture yourself as a fur trader leaving Yakutsk in January 1823. Your mission: reach a distant outpost 500 kilometers north, pick up sable pelts, and come back before spring melts the snow. You have a dog sled with 10 huskies trained to pull the sled over snow. Your load has supplies, gear, and trade items. The temperature is minus 35 degrees Celsius, but that's normal for Yakut winter. The sun rises late and sets early, only about 4 to 5 hours of dim light during winter days at these latitudes. Most of the time, it's twilight or complete darkness. You are dressed in layered clothing, each layer critical for survival. It starts with the skin. Underwear, a shirt, and leggings made from thin reindeer and moose leather, softened and oiled to repel water. This is the first layer. It absorbs sweat and wicks moisture away from the skin. Moisture is the enemy in cold weather. Wet clothing freezes and forms an icy shell, draining heat from your body. Staying dry is essential. Over this, you wear a wool shirt, usually made from sheep's wool. Wool traps air between its fibers, creating an insulating layer. Even if it gets wet, wool continues to provide warmth. That's a unique property. Your pants are made of thick cloth or leather, tucked into tall fur boots. The coat, called a torbasa, is sewn from reindeer or moose hides, with short, dense, durable fur on the outer layer, designed to withstand harsh conditions. Inside the torbasa, dry grass, sedge, and moss provide extra insulation and soak up moisture. The legs sweat even in cold weather, and that moisture must go somewhere. Every element of clothing is designed to keep you alive in this frozen wilderness. Welcome to Lectures Under the Moon with Daniel Hayes. The grass absorbs water during the day, then is pulled out at night and dried by the fire, only to be replaced with fresh growth in the morning. Overclothing, traditional attire of the northern peoples, is worn, either a shirt or a parka. The traditional clothing, called a molitsa, is made from reindeer hides with the fur inside. It consists of 2 layers. The fur lining provides more effective insulation against the cold. The hood is sewn in, trimmed with wolf or Arctic fox fur around the face. This fur does not freeze from breath, nor do ice crystals form on it. The Milica is long, reaching down to the knees, and is secured with a belt. The arms slide into sleeves that end in sewn-on mittens, thick, fur-lined pouches without separate fingers. The fingers stay together, which preserves warmth better than when separated. When the cold is especially harsh, a second layer, called a sovik, another parka with the fur facing outward, is worn over the Milica. The two layers of fur trap an insulating layer of air between them, providing protection down to temperatures of -50 to 60 degrees Celsius. Yet such clothing is heavy. The entire set can weigh between 15 and 20 kilograms. Moving in it is difficult, but standing still for hours without feeling cold is possible. A fur hood covers the head, topped with a fur hat called a ushanka, made from fox or Arctic fox fur, with long ears tied under the chin. The face is protected by a scarf wrapped around, leaving only the eyes visible. However, the scarf quickly gets wet from breath, turns icy, and becomes stiff. It must be periodically removed, beaten out to remove ice, and dried by the fire. You set out at dawn, with the first light. The dogs run at a trot, and the sled glides over the packed, snow-covered trail, known as a winter road or winter track. Unlike summer roads, a winter track is a route used solely during the cold months, when rivers freeze, swamps are coated with ice, and snow compacts. In summer, these areas are impassable, but in winter they become the only arteries connecting remote settlements to the outside world. The first few hours are easy. The sun rises, though it only climbs about 10 to 15 degrees above the horizon. The light is dim, pale, and the snow is blinding. Your eyes are protected by wooden goggles, slats with narrow slits that reduce the amount of light and prevent snow blindness. Snow blindness, or corneal burn from reflected ultraviolet rays, causes painful, temporary vision loss, feeling as if sand has been poured into the eyes. In the 10th century, there was no treatment. Sufferers had to endure lying in darkness for several days until healing occurred. In a solitary journey, this could mean death. Miles pass, and the forest stretches endlessly. Larches, spruces, pines, all buried in snow. Branches bend under the weight of snow, sometimes breaking with a snap. In the freezing air, sounds travel far and clearly. One can hear the breathing of the dogs, the squeaking of the sled runners, the crunch of snow beneath the runners. There are no other sounds. Birds are silent or have migrated south, and large animals hide away. The silence is absolute, oppressive, and unfamiliar to modern humans. After 4 or 5 hours, the sun begins to set. By 2 or 3 in the afternoon, dusk falls. It's time to find a place to camp. You look around, assessing the surroundings. The ideal spot is the edge of a forest near a river or stream. The river provides water, even if frozen, and the trees offer shelter from the wind better than an open space, yet they let in more light than a dense forest. Trees supply firewood and materials for building shelter. You stop the sled, and the dogs are happy to rest. They curl up into balls right in the snow. Their noses are tucked under their tails, their thick fur, undercoat, and fat layers protecting them from the cold. They can sleep in the snow at temperatures below 0 Celsius without harm, but humans cannot. You need shelter. The first priority is to build a fire. There is no survival without fire. You clear the snow down to the ground or to a solid layer underneath. You level a space about 2 meters across. From your sled, you take out an axe, heavy, forged, perfectly sharpened. You search for dry wood, dead and weathered spruce or larch still standing. Such trees are present in every forest. The key is knowing how to see them. Dead trees are not covered with snow on their branches. Snow doesn't cling to dead branches. The bark has partially peeled away. The wood is gray and dry. You chop the tree, and it falls with a dull thud into the snowbank. You cut off the branches and saw the trunk into logs about 1.5 meters long. These will be your firewood for the night. You need a lot of wood, more than it might seem at first. The cold is relentless. The fire must burn all night for 12 to 14 hours. This means an entire tree, sometimes two. Starting a fire in freezing conditions is no easy task. Matches, of course, existed in the year 1823, but they were rare. The roads are unreliable. More commonly, people used fire steel, flint and steel, a piece of steel struck against a flint to produce sparks. It takes effort, but it works. Effort is a flammable material. You keep dry moss, birch bark, charred cloth stored in a waterproof pouch, shielded from moisture. You take out your fire steel, strike sparks onto the tinder, shredded moss or bark. Sparks fall, and the tinder begins to smolder. Gently blow on the glow, carefully, and add thin strips of birch bark. Birch burns even when damp, as it contains oils, igniting easily. The flames grow quickly. You add small twigs, then larger sticks, and finally, firewood. Within 10 minutes, the fire roars, flames rising up to 1 meter high. The heat can be felt even through thick clothing. Fire is life. It provides warmth, light, the ability to melt snow for water, cook food, and dry clothes. Without fire, a night in a freezing forest means a slow death. You understand this deeply, so you build your fire carefully, surrounding it with stones or logs so that the heat reflects inward and doesn't dissipate into the cold air. Now, a shelter. In the 18th century, there were no modern synthetic tents, light, compact, easy to carry. Instead, there were fabric tents made from canvas, impregnated with oil for waterproofing. But they were heavy and prone to freezing in the cold, becoming stiff and unyielding. Most travelers relied on simpler, more effective methods. The first option was the traditional tent of northern peoples, the teepee. The teepee, a conical shelter made from animal hides or tarpaulin, stretched over a framework of poles. You remove a bundle of hides or tarpaulin from your sled, along with a bundle of long, thin logs, larch or spruce, that have been prepared in advance and either brought along or cut on the spot. You stick the poles into the snow in a circle, leaning the tops toward the center, and tie them together with a rope. This creates a cone-shaped frame about 2 to 3 meters tall, with a diameter of 3 to 4 meters at the base. You cover the frame with hides or tarpaulin, leaving an entry on one side and an opening at the top for the smoke to escape. The base is weighted down with snow or logs to prevent the wind from knocking it over. Inside, you clear the snow down to the ground and lay a thick layer of evergreen boughs, fir or pine branches. The boughs insulate against the cold ground and form a soft bedding. In the center of the teepee, there is a hearth. An open fire is dangerous in such a confined space due to smoke, carbon monoxide, and fire risk. Instead, a small, portable, collapsible iron stove is used. You assemble it from pots brought in your sled, place it on stones or bricks to protect the ground from heat, and connect a chimney pipe through an opening at the top of the teepee. The stove is fired with firewood, providing heat and warming the interior air, ensuring survival through the cold night. Under proper fire management, the temperature inside can rise to freezing, or even reach plus 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, while outside it remains at minus 40. But maintaining the stove requires constant attention. The wood burns quickly, and new logs must be added every half hour or hour. This means sleeping continuously through the night is impossible. Someone has to stay awake, tending the fire. Among groups of travelers, shifts are assigned. Each person monitors the stove for 2 or 3 hours, then hands over to the next. When alone, A person must wake every hour to add logs, and then try to fall asleep again. The sleep is fragmented and does not provide full rest, but it's better than freezing. If there's no stove or no material for a tent, another method is used: a snow trench or an igloo. Snow is an excellent insulator. The trapped air between snow crystals doesn't conduct heat. A thick layer of snow shields from the wind and the cold. Eskimos and other Arctic peoples have known this for thousands of years. They built igloos, dome-shaped homes from blocks of snow, in which they could live for months. Constructing an igloo is an art that requires skill and experience. The snow must be of the right density, not loose or icy, but compressed by the wind into a tightly packed mass. The snow is cut into blocks using a saw or a long knife. These blocks are laid in a spiral pattern. Each subsequent row is tilted slightly inward, forming a dome. The final central block, called the capstone, is inserted from above to close the structure. Gaps are filled with soft snow to insulate. The entrance is a tunnel dug below ground level. Cold air, being heavier, flows out through the tunnel, while warmer air stays inside. Inside the igloo, it can be relatively warm. Body heat, a candle, or a small oil lamp can raise the temperature to -5 to -10 degrees Celsius, which is about 30 degrees warmer than outside. The interior walls become slightly glazed or glazed over, smooth and windproof. An igloo can stand for weeks or even months until spring arrives and the weather warms. But building an igloo takes 2 to 3 hours and demands strength and skill. An untrained traveler might struggle to finish it before nightfall, exhausting themselves or risking frostbite. That's why many preferred a simpler solution: a snow shelter or trench. A snow trench is dug into a deep snowdrift. Find a spot where the snow is thick, about 2 or 3 meters deep, and firm enough not to collapse. Start digging with a shovel or even with your hands, scooping snow outward as you crawl inside the snow. The tunnel is carved horizontally, then expanded inside to form a cavity. It's about 2 meters long, a meter wide, and a meter high, enough to lie down and curl up. The entrance is closed with a snow block or a backpack, leaving a small vent hole for ventilation. Without ventilation, carbon dioxide can build up, and oxygen runs out. A small opening is enough to exchange air, but not so large as to let in excessive cold. Inside the shelter, you lay down a bedding, branches, reindeer hides, or any insulating material that keeps out the snow. You crawl into a sleeping bag. In the 19th century, a sleeping bag was not a synthetic cocoon, but a fur bag sewn from reindeer pelts, with the fur facing inward. Or it was simply several reindeer skins wrapped around the body. The fur retains body heat and prevents it from escaping into the snow. Still, even inside a fur bag within a snow shelter, it remains cold. The temperature can be -10 or -15 degrees Celsius, warmer than outside, but still well below freezing. You shiver as your body attempts to generate heat. You drift into a restless sleep, exhausted, but the sleep is shallow and filled with anxiety. Despite the cold, the body strives to keep warm, constantly fighting to maintain core temperature amid the endless whiteness of the snow and the biting wind outside. The environment is silent, but relentless, a testament to the harshness of survival in the Arctic. Each method, whether building an igloo or digging a trench, demands knowledge, skill, and resilience, traits that have sustained mankind in the most extreme conditions for millennia. These techniques are not just about shelter, but about harnessing the primal power of snow and ice, turning seemingly inhospitable surroundings into a refuge against the relentless cold. You wake up every hour, checking whether snow has blocked the ventilation opening, or if your feet have frozen. You move your toes, trying to get the blood flowing. In the morning, you crawl out, stiff and exhausted, but alive. Now, let's consider what one eats during such journeys. Food is the source of energy, and in the cold energy burns quickly. The body operates at its limit, constantly working to maintain its temperature. Every movement demands effort. Calories are needed in enormous amounts, 6,000 to 7,000 per day, twice as much as under normal conditions. The diet primarily consists of fat and meat. Carbohydrates provide quick energy, but fats offer long-lasting, steady power. Fat is caloric, 9 calories per gram compared to 4 calories for carbohydrates and proteins. A kilogram of fat equals about 2 kilograms of bread in energy, but weighs less. Fat doesn't spoil in the cold and is easy to carry.
Travelers brought with them lard, salted pork fat, or the internal fat of reindeer and moose. They sliced it into strips and ate it raw, or melted it in a small pot, drinking it hot like broth. It sounds disgusting, but after a day in the frost, when the body is exhausted and trembling, hot fat seems like nectar. It burns the mouth, slides down the throat, and almost instantly provides a surge of warmth and energy. Dried meat, known as pemmican among Native Americans, or Eucola among Siberian peoples, was also common. Reindeer, moose, and fish were sliced into thin strips, dried in the sun or over smoke until completely dehydrated, then ground into powder, mixed with melted fat and berries, and pressed into dense blocks. These could be stored for years without spoiling or molding. You break off a piece, chew it. The texture is tough, requiring effort, but it is nourishing and filling. Hardtack was another staple, dried rye bread, hardened to the consistency of stone. You break off a piece with your teeth, or soak it in hot tea to soften it. The tea was usually strong, either pressed, Chinese, or locally made herbal varieties. It was brewed intensely and drunk hot in large quantities. Hot liquid inside the body warms you from within, helping to maintain water balance. Dehydration happens rapidly in the cold. The dry, cold air sucks moisture out with every exhalation. The body loses water unnoticed. Thirst feels less intense than in the heat, but the need for water remains the same. Grains such as oats, buckwheat, or millet are cooked in water or broth, forming a thick, hearty, and calorie-rich porridge. Butter, lard, or dried meat is added. It is eaten straight from the pot before it cools. Once cooled, the porridge freezes within minutes, turning into a solid block of ice, inedible. Hunting while on the move supplements the diet, if luck is on your side. Rabbits, ptarmigans, and occasionally moose or deer can be caught. But in winter, animals are scarce, hiding away and avoiding humans. Hunting takes time, strength, and ammunition, and often does not justify the effort. It's more reliable to carry reserves. Preparing food is a ritual that shapes the evening. A fire is started, a small pot placed over it, and snow is melted. A large amount of snow is needed to produce 1 liter of water. Snow is mostly air, and 3 or 4 small pots of snow boil down to a liter of water. The water is boiled, tea is brewed, porridge or soup is cooked. The process takes about an hour, but that hour is spent by the fire, resting, drying clothes, warming hands and feet. People eat silently, focused, each lost in thoughts of home, warmth, and how many days remain until reaching their goal. Conversations are rare. Fatigue runs deep, reaching into the bones. After eating, sleep follows if shelter is available, or a shift at the fire if not. If there is no shelter, you sit or doze in short bursts, keeping the fire alive until dawn. Now, let's imagine a different scenario. The indigenous people, the Evenki, are constantly on the move through the taiga. They are reindeer herders, following the seasonal routes of the northern herds. Their life is one of continuous travel. In winter, the reindeer graze in the forest, digging through the snow to find lichen. Come summer, they head north to the tundra, escaping the biting insects. The Evenki follow behind, dismantling and collecting their yurts. Every few days, they transport all their belongings on reindeer sleds. Their yurts are larger and more substantial than the temporary shelters of traders. The frame is constructed from about 20 stout poles, each 4 to 5 meters high. The covering consists of dozens of reindeer hides sewn together into a cloth, stretched tightly over the frame. During winter, the yurt has 2 layers of hides, with an air pocket between them for insulation. The entrance features a double curtain made of hides, forming a vestibule that minimizes heat loss when entering and leaving. Inside, a central hearth provides heat, with an open flame burning in the middle. Smoke rises through an opening at the top, escaping outside. Not all of the smoke exits. Some lingers, hanging beneath the dome, irritating the eyes and settling as black soot on the hides. But this is the cost of warmth. An open fire produces more heat than a stove. The yurt is heated until it reaches a temperature where one can sit comfortably without outer clothing, even when outside temperatures dip below 0. Around the hearth, reindeer hides are spread over the turf, creating sleeping areas. A family of 6 to 8 people sleeps in a circle, feet toward the fire and heads toward the walls. Children sleep in the center, closer to the warmth, while adults occupy the outer edges where it's colder. Each person is wrapped in a fur blanket sewn from hides, forming a bed. At night, someone keeps watch, tending the fire, adding firewood, ensuring the flames do not go out. Usually the elders, a grandfather or grandmother, who sleep lightly, wake at the slightest change in temperature. Life inside a yurt during winter is a constant battle against moisture. Breathing, steam from cooking pots, and damp clothes all cause humidity. This moisture condenses on the cold walls of the yurt, freezing and forming a layer of ice inside. By morning, the walls are coated with a thick crust of ice, which flakes off with any movement. Periodically, the hides need to be removed, taken outside, beaten to knock off the ice, and dried in the cold air. Frosty weather dries out the moisture without melting it. Clothing also requires constant care. During the day, body heat causes sweating. The moisture seeps into the underwear and moves into the outer layers. By evening, the clothes are damp, and if not dried, they will freeze overnight, becoming stiff and cold. To prevent this, each piece of clothing is hung on sticks around the fire, turned over and left to dry. This process takes an hour or an hour and a half, but is crucial. Dry clothing makes the difference between comfort and suffering, between life and frostbite. Frostbite remains a constant threat. The first signs are tingling and numbness in the fingers or toes, nose, ears, and cheeks. Ignoring these signals and not warming up promptly can lead to a loss of sensation. The skin turns pale and waxy. This is the first degree of frostbite, reversible if warmed in time. However, if exposure continues, the frostbite worsens. The second degree involves blistering, with clear or blood-filled fluid collecting under the skin. The third degree causes tissue death. The skin turns black as necrosis sets in. The fourth degree involves deep tissue destruction, affecting muscles and bone. Frostbitten fingers or limbs may fall off naturally or require amputation to prevent gangrene. In the 20th century, treatment of frostbite was primitive. The frostbitten part was rubbed with snow, which actually worsened the situation, damaging tissues further. The correct method was slow warming in warm, not hot water, but only a few knew this. Now let us consider the expeditions of explorers, people who ventured into uncharted lands, mapped the terrain, described the nature, the peoples, the resources. The 10th century was an era of great geographical discoveries in the Arctic and subarctic regions. Russian expeditions explored Siberia, the Far East, and Alaska. The British and Americans searched for a northwest passage, a sea route through the Arctic from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Scandinavians mapped the northern territories. These expeditions were grand enterprises. Dozens of people, tons of equipment, months or even years spent in travel. Organizing shelter for such a group was a logistical nightmare. Dozens of tents, or the construction of a large winter shelter, were necessary. A winter shelter was a log cabin built at the site where the expedition planned to spend the winter. Construction of the shelter began in autumn, before the first frosts. The location was carefully chosen, protected from the wind, near a river for water, and in the forest for firewood. Trees were felled, dozens of trunks cut down, branches pruned, and the logs laid in a square. The corners were joined with notches, and moss was stuffed into the gaps to seal them. The roof was made of logs covered with bark or turf, then covered with earth to insulate. The stove was assembled from stones or clay, with a chimney venting outside. The process took weeks and required heavy labor, but the result was a warm, secure dwelling, capable of withstanding the polar night. When the sun does not rise for months, temperatures plummet to 50 or 60 degrees below zero, and storms rage for weeks. Life inside the shelter was monotonous and claustrophobic. Dozens of people were confined in a small, dark, smoky, cold space, even with a stove. Temperatures near the walls could fall below freezing. Frost formed in the corners. Going outside was dangerous. It was easy to get lost in a blizzard or freeze just a few meters from the door. Food supplies were limited. The diet was sparse: salted meat, dry biscuits, grains. Occasionally fresh meat, if hunting was successful. Vitamins were scarce, and scurvy often struck. Gums bled, teeth fell out, wounds refused to heal. Many perished from scurvy, unaware of its cause, unaware that a handful of pine needles brewed into tea or a piece of raw meat could save them. Boredom, darkness, cold, and homesickness weighed heavily on the mind. All this affected mental health profoundly. Conflicts erupted over trivial matters, sometimes leading to fights or even murders. Discipline, the commander's authority, routines, repairs of equipment, training, games, and reading helped maintain morale. But not always. Some expeditions ended tragically. People died from the cold, starvation, disease, or accidents. The most famous was the Franklin expedition of 1845, which sought the Northwest Passage. 129 men aboard 2 ships became trapped in the ice. The crew abandoned the ships and attempted to walk to civilization. All perished. Their remains were discovered over the course of decades. Analyses showed they died from a combination of scurvy, starvation, lead poisoning from canned food, and the effects of cold. Some likely resorted to cannibalism in a desperate attempt to survive. Despite this, there were successful expeditions as well. Those who learned from indigenous peoples adopted their methods, clothing, diet, shelter techniques, and managed to survive, reach their goals, and return home. Roald Amundsen, who reached the South Pole in 1911, once said that his success was due to learning from the Inuit in the Arctic over many years, adopting their techniques and knowledge. His expedition relied on dog sleds, fur clothing, and traditional snow shelters. All members survived. In contrast, Robert Scott, his rival, depended on European methods: horses instead of dogs, cotton and wool clothing instead of fur, and snow shelters replaced by tents. Scott's team reached the pole later than Amundsen's. On the return journey, everyone perished from cold, hunger, and exhaustion. These 2 expeditions illustrate the importance of properly understanding survival in extreme environments. The traditional methods developed by indigenous peoples over thousands of years living in the North proved effective. European approaches, based on assumptions, pride, and ignorance, proved deadly. Let's return to the everyday life of a traveler in the forest. It's morning. You wake up in a tent or a snow cave, stiff and slow-moving. The first task is to ignite the fire if it's gone out. You crawl out of your shelter into the pre-dawn darkness. Frost bites at your face, your breath catches. The sky begins to brighten in the east, stars fading. The coldest time of the 24 hours is just before dawn, about 5 to 10 degrees Celsius colder than during the day. You search for yesterday's fire, clearing away snow, hoping to find some embers still burning. If there are any, you carefully add birch bark, blow gently to revive the flames. If not, you start over, striking a fire steel, sparks flying, trying to ignite tinder. Your hands are numb, fingers stiff. Sparks are difficult to produce, and the fire refuses to catch easily. Finally, a little smoke, a flicker of flame, and the fire begins to burn. Relief washes over you, almost physically. You set a small pot on the fire, melt snow to get water, and boil it to make tea. As the water warms, you stretch, move around, or if others are nearby, you share a few moments of activity. Jumping, waving your arms to get blood flowing. Movement warms you from the inside out. Your body begins to wake up. The tea is ready. You drink it hot and burning, adding sugar and fat. Crumbling dry bread straight into the mug, creating a thick, calorie-rich mixture. Breakfast and drink combine into one. After the second mug, you feel your strength returning, energy renewed. You're ready to continue your journey. Packing your gear, disassembling your shelter, if it's a tent, folding away the skins, tying the poles, loading everything onto sleds. If it's a snow cave, simply crawling out, grabbing your belongings, and moving on. The cave will stay as it is, gradually settling, melting away over weeks. The dogs are harnessed, sleds checked for damage from the night. Cold makes the wood brittle, tendons and bindings might snap. Everything's in order. You set off again. The day passes in monotonous movement. The dogs pull the sleds, you walk beside or ahead, breaking trail through deep snow. Snowshoes, oval frames of bent wood strapped with leather or sinew, distribute the weight, preventing you from sinking. But they are heavy and awkward to walk in. Your feet are wider apart, your gait waddle-like. By the end of the day, your legs tingle and muscles ache. The landscape changes slowly, or not at all. Forest, snow, forest, snow. Sometimes you cross a frozen river covered with snow, but beneath the snow, the ice may be thin, especially over flowing water. Falling through the ice is deadly. The water is freezing, your clothes instantly soaked, heavy, pulling you down. Getting out is difficult. The ice cracks under your hands. Even if you manage to escape, wet clothes on the freezing surface freeze within minutes, forming a thick icy shell around you. You need to start a fire immediately. Take off your wet clothing and dry yourself, or death from hypothermia will come within an hour. That's why crossing rivers must be done cautiously. First, the ice is checked with a heavy, pointed metal crowbar on a long handle. You strike the ice with it and listen to the sound. A dull, dense sound indicates thick, reliable ice. A ringing, crisp sound signals thin, dangerous ice. You walk on the safe sections, avoiding suspicious spots. Dogs can sense danger and refuse to walk on thin ice. Listen to them. Their instincts are more reliable than human calculations. By midday, you stop briefly for a rest. You light a small fire, boil some tea, and eat cold food, fat, dry bread, dried meat, or salted pork. You rest for half an hour, sometimes an hour, then set out again. The sun is already leaning toward the horizon, even though only midday has passed. The day is short, and every hour of daylight must be used wisely. In the afternoon, fatigue begins to accumulate. Steps become heavier, thoughts slow down,
and the monotony of movement can lull you into complacency. It's essential to shake off this drowsiness, stay alert, and keep your senses sharp. Dangers are numerous. Wolves, bears if they are not sleeping, avalanches in the mountains, cracks under the snow, or ice holes on the rivers. There is also the risk of getting lost if a snowstorm starts. Snowstorms are particularly dangerous. Visibility drops to just a few meters. The wind knocks you off your feet. Snow blows into your face, into your eyes, nose, and mouth. It becomes impossible to navigate. Even a compass becomes useless if landmarks are obscured. The best course of action is to stop, build a shelter, and wait out the storm. But if a snowstorm hits in an open area far from the forest, with no shelter nearby, your only options are to dig a snow trench or burrow into the snow and wait. Storms can last for hours or even days. Food supplies and firewood are limited, making this a true test of willpower, patience, and faith that you will survive. As evening falls, find a place to spend the night. Repeat the same routine as yesterday. Build a fire, set up a shelter, eat, and rest. Over the course of a day, you may travel 20, 30, sometimes even 40 kilometers, depending on the terrain and snow depth. There are still 10 days left to reach your destination, about 125 miles. Every day is the same, demanding equal effort. The monotony creates a rhythm, lulling you into becoming part of the movement, the forest, and the winter landscape. But this monotony also poses dangers. Vigilance can fade, and mistakes happen. You might forget to check the ice and fall through, forget to dry your clothes, and frostbite might claim you. Neglect to eat enough, weaken, and be unable to continue.
That's why experienced travelers follow strict routines, repeating the same actions in the same order every day. It's not a restriction, but a safeguard. Routine saves lives. Finally, after weeks of travel, you catch sight of the goal. An outpost, a village, a town, smoke rising above rooftops, lights shining in windows. People. Returning to civilization after weeks in the desolate wilderness seems almost impossible. You enter the village. Dogs bark. Villagers come out to see who's arriving. They meet you, lead you to a warm house, seat you by the stove, and feed you hot, hearty food. Real food, not just bread and salted pork. Warmth envelops you. Your body relaxes. Only now do you realize how tense and exhausted you've been. You spend several days recovering, replenishing supplies, then set out again, carrying a load you either brought with you or took away. Once more, it's another week in the forest, in the snow, amid frost. This is life, either chosen or imposed by circumstances. A life that either forges resilience or destroys it, leaving no middle ground. Now, let's examine the technologies and gear that helped with survival. We'll start with clothing, exploring it in more detail. Fur clothing of the northern peoples is the result of thousands of years of evolutionary design. Every detail is carefully crafted for maximum functionality. The belitsa I mentioned earlier is a type of clothing that is completely enclosed and worn over the head, made from the pelts of autumn deer. During fall, the fur on a deer is at its thickest, with dense underfur and long guard hairs. These pelts are sewn together with tendons, which are strong, flexible, and resistant to decay. The stitches are special. First an inward seam, followed by an outward seam that seals the first, ensuring that water and wind do not penetrate through the seams. The hood of the belitsa is deep, with a long visor in front that shields the face from snow and wind. It is edged with fur from a wolf or a wolverine. This fur does not freeze from breath, and ice crystals can be easily brushed off because the hair's structure is unique, smooth, and without serrations, preventing ice from sticking. In contrast, the fur of a dog or a fox tends to freeze, transforming into a solid ice mass that is useless. That is why wolverine, wolf, and similar pelts are highly valued, despite their coarse and less aesthetically pleasing appearance compared to sable or Arctic fox. Mittens are sewn directly onto the sleeves, so they cannot be lost. Inside, removable mittens made of soft fur are inserted. They can be taken out when fine work is needed, such as tying knots, loading a rifle, or starting a fire. Working in thick mittens is impossible, so they must be removed. Hands quickly get cold, and then they have to be put back on. The boots, called tormosa, are fur-lined and require special care. They must not be dried near a fire or in hot heat, as the fur will burn and the leather will stiffen and crack. Drying must be slow, at room temperature, with dry grass stuffed inside to absorb moisture. This process takes about a day, so travelers always carry 2 pairs of such boots, one on their feet and one drying. They alternate each day. The soles of the boots are smooth and tend to slide on ice. To improve grip, hunters tie on iron frames with spikes over the soles, or simply wrap a cord or rope around the bottom to create a textured surface that increases friction. Snowshoes are also diverse. Forest snowshoes are wide and oval, designed for loose, deep snow. Mountain models are narrow, long, with a curved tip for dense snow and steep slopes. Marsh snowshoes are large and almost circular, meant for very loose, wet snow. Each type is suited to specific conditions, and using the wrong snowshoe wastes energy. Skis were used, but not like modern versions. They were shorter, wider, with a raised middle section for the foot, wrapped in reindeer or deer hide, with the hair facing forward. The hide, called camus, has a directed grain. It slides smoothly forward, but grips when pushed back, preventing slipping. This is crucial when ascending slopes. If skis slip backward, climbing becomes impossible. Properly designed skis stay on the slope, providing stability. Narts, or dog sleds, are lightweight, durable, and flexible. The runners are made of hard wood, attached with leather straps to a platform, not nailed rigidly, but connected by flexible bindings. This allows the nart to bend over uneven terrain without breaking. In cold weather, when the wood becomes brittle, a rigid structure can crack on the first bump. Flexible constructions absorb shocks and last for years. The runners are covered with a thin layer of ice at night to reduce friction, formed by pouring water over them in the evening, which freezes into a smooth, slick surface by morning. This makes sleds glide easily, and dogs find pulling them simpler, although the ice wears down and needs to be refreshed daily. The sled dogs, or huskies, are specially bred for harness work. Strong, enduring, with thick underfur that allows them to sleep on snow in temperatures as low as -40 degrees Celsius. They eat less than one might expect. Just a handful of fish or meat per day is enough, but they work to their limits day after day. Their stamina and resilience are remarkable, making them indispensable companions for survival in the harsh Arctic environment. They cover dozens of kilometers, hauling hundreds of kilograms. Managing a dog sled team is an art. The musher stands on the runners or runs alongside, shouting commands in a voice, occasionally flicking the whip. The dogs understand dozens of commands: forward, stop, left, right, faster, slower. The lead dog is the alpha, the smartest, most experienced. The others follow behind. Communication between the musher and the leader is critical. Trust, understanding, mutual respect. A bad musher pushes the dogs too hard. They weaken and die. A good musher protects them. They serve for years, becoming almost part of the family. The rifles used for hunting are flintlock, muzzle loading, slow, unreliable in freezing temperatures. Flint strikes a spark that ignites the powder on a shelf. The flash passes through a priming hole to ignite the main charge inside the barrel. The shot fires. But in the cold, the powder becomes frosted, and it doesn't ignite. Misfires are common, sometimes at the most critical moments. Suddenly, a bear charges. The trigger is pulled. Click. Nothing. The bear is closer. Panic sets in. That's why hunters double their efforts with backup weapons: a spear, a knife, an axe, always ready. The bear, wounded but not killed, is a deadly threat. 300 or more kilograms of fury, pain, claws, and teeth. A hunter walking through the taiga in winter knows that an encounter is always possible. Bears are supposed to sleep in dens, but some don't make it in time. They wander, hungry and angry, or their dens are disturbed. A bear emerges early, disoriented and aggressive. Such a wandering bear is more dangerous than any predator. It's fearless of humans. It's been hungry for months, ready to attack anything. There's a story recorded in a trader's journal from Irkutsk dating back to the 1930s. A group of 5 hunters wintered in a hut in the upper reaches of the Lena River. January, with temperatures below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. They went out to check their traps for sable about 10 kilometers from the shelter. They returned after dark, the torchlight illuminating the way. The lead dog was at the front, followed by the others in a line. Suddenly, the leader stopped, raised a paw, and signaled to stay still. In the darkness, something was moving ahead, massive, black against the snow. A bear, a large male, a wandering one. The rifle was ready, but shooting in the dark was risky. Miss, and the bear might attack. They decided to retreat slowly, backing away without turning around. The bear followed at a distance, but didn't close in. Still, it didn't fall behind either. They moved for kilometers in this tense silence, the feeling almost unbearable. Finally, they saw the cabin with its light glowing through the window. They scurried inside, slammed the door, and propped it with logs. The bear approached, sniffing the door, scratching with claws, its breath audible through the cracks. It stood there for hours, then eventually left. The next morning they found tracks, paw prints larger than a man's head. The claws had left deep grooves on the door. Now they decided they had to take down the bear before it returned. Even though it was dangerous, they needed the meat. It was valuable. 4 of them went out, leaving 1 to guard the hut. Following the tracks, they found the bear in a spruce thicket, digging through the snow, searching for something. They encircled it from different sides and opened fire simultaneously. 3 shots, 2 hits. The bear roared and charged at the nearest hunter. The hunter fell, and the bear was upon him. The others ran, shooting at close range, hitting with rifles, striking with axes and spears. The bear died, but the hunter under it was also lost, ribs broken, internal organs crushed. Despite efforts to help, he died within an hour. Many journals from explorers describe strange experiences, ghosts of comrades they saw, long dead, reappearing in moments of danger or after encounters with death. Their stories speak of apparitions, of seeing the faces of loved ones or fallen friends haunting the icy wilderness. Walking silently nearby, they could hear faint singing, music that did not exist, echoing in the cold air. They found footprints in the snow, convinced someone was following them, only to realize the tracks were their own, looping in circles. Getting lost is easy, even for the experienced. A snowstorm erases footprints and landmarks, making navigation impossible. The sun is hidden, and not everyone carries a compass. You walk as if on a straight path, but gradually you turn, describing a wide arc, eventually returning to the starting point. Panic rises, and you start to run, your breathing ragged, footsteps pounding in your ears. Exhausted, you stumble and fall into the snow, lying there, unable to lift yourself up.
The cold seeps into your bones, your mind foggy, consciousness dimming. If you don't stop, gather yourself, and think rationally, it's the end. A basic rule for the lost: stop moving. Do not run aimlessly. Do not waste your energy. Stop, look around, assess your surroundings. Where is the sun? Even through the clouds, its position can be determined by the brighter part of the sky. Where is the moss on the trees?
Usually on the northern side, though it's not always reliable. Which way does the wind blow? Its prevailing direction is known and can be used as a guide. Are there footprints? Yours, someone else's, animal tracks, or human signs? Rivers flow downhill toward larger streams and inhabited areas. Walking along a river downstream offers a chance of reaching civilization. Build a shelter, light a fire, stay put, and wait if you know you are being searched for. Rescue teams are organized and actively searching, but finding one person in the endless taiga is like looking for a needle in a haystack. A smoke signal can help. During the day, black smoke rising from green branches and pine needles is visible for miles. At night, a bright fire acts as a beacon, especially if firewood is available. But if no one is searching, because no one knows you are lost or the time for your return has not yet passed, then you must save yourself. You move forward, hoping to find a way out before your strength, food, or luck run out. In extreme situations, when supplies are depleted, survival becomes a matter of creativity and desperation. The bark of trees, especially the inner layer of cambium between the bark and the wood, is edible. Pine, fir, and larch cambium has a sweetish taste and contains starch and sugars. It can be scraped off with a knife, eaten raw or boiled. It's not filling, but provides calories and fills the stomach. Northern peoples used tree bark as an emergency ration during times of famine. Pine needles are a source of vitamin C and can be brewed into tea. The taste is bitter and resinous, but it prevents scurvy. A few cups of pine needle tea a day are enough to supply essential vitamins. Lichens, called reindeer moss, grow on the ground, trees, and rocks. Reindeer eat enormous quantities of it. It is edible for humans too, though it contains acids that can irritate the stomach.
To prepare it, the moss must be soaked in water, changing the water regularly, then boiled for a long time. The result is a gel-like, flavorless yet nutritious mass. In desperate times, it can be eaten even without soaking, though it will cause stomach pain. Roots of plants like cattails, reeds, and water lilies can be dug out from beneath the snow, washed and boiled. Their starchy content provides energy. Small animals, if caught, can also be eaten: mice, voles, squirrels. Simple traps are set using ropes and fallen logs, sometimes capturing something. The animal is skinned, gutted, and cooked over an open fire on a stick. About 50 grams of meat is better than nothing. Fish can be caught under the ice of a river or lake by drilling a hole with a chisel or axe. A primitive fishing rod can be made from a stick, with a line made from animal tendons or torn threads from clothing. A hook can be fashioned from a nail, wire, or bone, baited with a piece of meat if available, or simply a shiny bare hook that attracts attention. The silence is broken only by the subtle crackle of the fire and the distant sounds of the winter wilderness. As you lower yourself into a hole in the ice, you wait patiently, knowing that winter fishing demands patience. Yet beneath the frozen surface, fish, perch, pike, whitefish, are active, hungry, and ready to strike. They can be caught, cleaned, and cooked. Their flesh is white, tender, and rich in calories. But catching fish, setting traps, gathering bark, all of this takes time and effort, resources that may be scarce. Hunger sets in quickly. After 3 or 4 days without food, strength begins to wane noticeably. A week of starvation makes movement and thought difficult. 2 weeks of deprivation lead to critical exhaustion, with organs starting to fail. The combination of hunger and cold kills faster than any of these forces alone.
The body consumes its calories trying to stay warm, but with none left, it begins to burn itself. First fat, then muscles, then vital tissues. Stories exist of those abandoned in the taiga, survivors weeks without food, eating bark, lichens, melting snow water. Rare, but they are real. The will to live, knowledge, luck, physical preparation, all these factors together offer a chance. But most perish. Their bodies are found in spring when the snow melts, emaciated and frozen, often several kilometers from the places they never knew could be their salvation. Back in the 10th century, there was no communication about their location. No radios, no phones, no signal flares. If someone got lost, nobody would know instantly. Days, even weeks, would pass before anyone raised an alarm. Then a search party would be sent out. But where? The vast taiga was unpredictable. The route could have changed, and the lost person might have gone in any direction. Searching took weeks, sometimes months, often fruitless. Experienced travelers always shared their planned routes, checkpoints, and timelines. They agreed, if I do not return by a certain date, start looking in this area. They left notes at winter shelters, on trees, in designated spots. I passed here on such and such date. I am heading there. Next note will be at such and such place. The system was primitive, but it worked. Shelters and huts built by previous travelers served as refuges. Scattered along the main routes through the taiga, these small wooden cabins with a single room, a stove, and bunks were spaced at roughly a day's journey apart. Inside, they always kept firewood and sometimes food, dry bread, grains, salt, matches. The rule of the taiga was simple. Leave supplies in the shelter for the next person. If you used some, replenish what you can, because whoever comes after might be on the brink of death, and your supplies could save them. Respect for this rule was absolute. Stealing from a shelter or failing to restock supplies was considered a grave sin, an act of betrayal against others who might fall into need. Tales of curses and retribution haunted those who robbed shelters, leaving subsequent travelers without provisions. These stories were told around campfires, passed down through generations. The lesson was clear. The taiga does not forgive greed or selfishness. Survival depends on mutual aid and collective effort. The diversity of winter dwellings among different peoples is vast, each adapted to local conditions. The Sami of Scandinavia used lava stone and cone-shaped tents resembling smaller portable chums, with a framework of thin, curved poles and coverings made from reindeer hides or rough fabric. Their hearths sat at the center, with smoke escaping through a hole in the roof. These lava tents could be assembled in about an hour and taken down in 30 minutes, all parts carried by reindeer. The Arctic Inuit of Canada and Greenland were masters of snow construction, building igloos, their specialty. But besides igloos, they also made other types of snow houses, like quinzhee, which are built not from blocks, but by excavating the snow itself. Such structures could withstand the harshest conditions, providing vital shelter in the endless winter. Large piles of loose snow accumulate around the shelter, left untouched for several hours, so that the snow can be compressed and slightly frozen by the cold. Then, from inside, a hollow is dug out, with the walls left thick, half a meter or even a meter, forming a cavity. The entrance is a tunnel at the bottom. The process is simpler than carving a needle-shaped hole. It doesn't require skill in cutting blocks, but it demands a lot of snow, time to gather it, and patience for compression. The indigenous peoples of the Arctic, Alaska, and northern Canada built winter homes from logs, often semi-underground. They would dig a pit about 1.5 meters deep. The sides were lined with logs, and the roof made from stakes covered with bark, moss, dirt, and then buried under snow. The entrance was through the roof via a ladder. Such a shelter stayed warm because the earth provided insulation, and the snow on top further kept the cold out. In the center, a hearth was built, with smoke escaping through a hole in the roof. Inside it was dark and smoky, yet even in the fiercest cold, it remained warm. Russian entrepreneurs and Siberian hunters preferred small cabins, tiny log huts, often temporary, abandoned after a season and used by others later. Building such a hut took about a week with 2 or 3 workers. Logs were chopped, trimmed, and assembled into a log structure, with gaps sealed with moss. The roof was made from stakes, bark, and moss, and the stove from stone or clay when available, or simply a fire pit. Windows were often absent, or just a small, semi-transparent opening covered with a dried animal bladder. The door was low, requiring one to stoop when entering, which helped retain heat. A low door was easier to close and let less cold inside. Inside, there were bunks along the walls, wooden platforms where people slept. These bunks were covered with fir branches and animal pelts, providing warmer sleep than on the floor. Warm air naturally rose, leaving the cold at the bottom. The stove was kept burning, raising the temperature inside to about 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Life was possible, but the stove needed a constant supply of firewood, an enormous amount. One person in a hut could burn a cubic meter of wood in a week, sometimes more. This meant continuous chopping, sawing, splitting, and hauling. The work was exhausting, but without it, survival was impossible during the coldest months. Chopping firewood in temperatures below -30 degrees Celsius was a special challenge. The frozen wood split easily when struck with a loud crack, but the axe would ring, rebound, and the vibrations would cause pain in the hands, even through gloves. Breaks were necessary to warm and stretch the fingers before continuing. The surrounding forest around the winter settlement was quickly cleared. First, the nearest trees were felled, then further ones, until the wooded area was exhausted. After that, wood had to be carried hundreds of meters from the forest, dragging logs back to the shelter. It was a grueling task that took hours every day, forcing the inhabitants to move their winter camps periodically. When the forest around was depleted, a new winter shelter was built elsewhere. Time in the winter camp stretched slowly. During the polar night in the north, which lasts for months, the sun never rises. There are only twilight at midday, and the rest of the time is darkness. Without light or the possibility to go outside, people tend to fall into depression and apathy. The so-called polar winter fatigue is a condition described by many researchers. It manifests as a desire to lie still, move less, feel indifferent to everything, irritability, and conflicts over minor issues. Engaging in activities helps. Repairs to equipment are an endless process. Clothing tears and needs mending. The sleds break and must be fixed. Weapons are cleaned and oiled. Animal pelts are processed and prepared for sale. Carving wood and bone, making tools and ornaments, telling stories, recalling past travels or home, playing games, such as dice, cards, or chess if available, reading rare books. All these activities help pass the long, dark months. When winter is at its harshest, every effort is aimed at survival. But life continues through routine tasks, stories, and memories, keeping the spirit alive amid the endless snow and darkness. Yet some carried on. Letters from diaries, notes, messages they intended to send once they returned. Religion played a significant role. Prayers recited morning and evening, icons hung on the walls, a cross above the doorway. Even in the remote wilderness, Sundays were observed. No work was done, and if possible, they read the Bible and sang psalms. These rituals provided a sense of structure to their time, a connection to home, to the familiar world they longed for, reminding them that they were human beings, not animals driven solely by instinct to survive. Indigenous peoples also had their own rituals and beliefs. Spirits of the forest, fire, and water were revered and appeased. Before hunting, before traveling, offerings were made. A piece of meat was thrown into the flames, a few drops of vodka poured onto the ground. A whispered prayer was uttered, asking for luck and protection. For them, the spiritual world was as real as the material one. Spirits influenced their chances, the weather, their health. Shamans conducted ceremonies, healed the sick, foretold the future, and communicated with spirits. Illnesses in the taiga were deadly. Without medicines or doctors, even a simple infection could be fatal. An infected cut that festered, turning into sepsis. A toothache that worsened, the infection spreading into the jaw, into the bloodstream. Pneumonia brought on by wet clothing or sleeping in the cold. Pneumonia struck swiftly, often within days. People relied on traditional medicine, herbs, decoctions, poultices, some effective, many not, often based on superstition. Bloodletting was considered a universal cure, but it only weakened patients further. Hot iron cauterization was used to stop bleeding and prevent gangrene, agonizing but occasionally successful. Fractures in remote areas were nearly a death sentence. If a leg was broken and walking was impossible, companions had to carry the injured or leave them behind. Leaving meant certain death, but carrying the person slowed the entire group, drained resources, and posed risks to everyone. Tough decisions were made, sometimes painfully and ruthlessly, out of necessity. Sometimes they decided to carry the injured, constructing makeshift stretchers from long, sturdy branches and taking turns hauling the burden. Other times, they left behind supplies of food, firewood, and promises to return once they reached their destination. Whether they came back depended entirely on circumstances. Teeth were an entirely different problem. Toothache in the wilderness was unbearable, distracting, preventing sleep, eating, or thinking clearly. Primitive treatments were all they had, rinsing with decoctions of oak bark or sage if available, pressing a heated stone against the cheek, chewing resin to numb the pain. If nothing else helped, they resorted to pulling the tooth. Grabbing the tooth with pliers, homemade or improvised, and yanking with all their might. The root often broke, causing bleeding and incredible pain, but afterward, relief sometimes followed. The infection source was removed, the mouth was rinsed with vodka, and the wounds either healed or became further infected, depending on luck. Hygiene in winter conditions was nearly non-existent. There was nowhere to wash, water was scarce, and wasting it on bathing was unthinkable. Faces were wiped with snow, brushing off dirt and refreshing the skin surface, if only superficially. But the body itself went weeks or even months without washing. Dirt accumulated, skin itched, and a strong odor developed. But one grew accustomed to it and stopped noticing. Everyone around smelled the same. Lice, bedbugs, constant companions, nestled in clothing and bedding, biting and spreading disease. Fighting them was hopeless in the field. Periodically, clothes were singed over a fire. The heat killed the parasites, but they soon reappeared. Typhoid, a disease manageable in the village, was deadly in the wilderness, often killing entire expeditions. Fever, rash, hallucinations. Death came within a week or two. Without treatment, survival chances were slim.
Women in the wilderness during winter faced their own challenges. Indigenous peoples, of course, included women in their nomadic way of life, adapting to the harsh environment alongside men. Women from the Yenki, Nenets, and Sami peoples worked alongside men, building tents, processing animal hides, preparing food, caring for children, and herding reindeer. Their endurance was astonishing. They gave birth in the tents, often in freezing temperatures, and by the next day, they were already back to work. Menstruation in such cold conditions, with no hygiene or supplies, was a constant hardship. Yet they endured, managing with moss, rags, and whatever materials they could find. European women on these expeditions were rare. Sometimes the wives of officers accompanied their husbands to Arctic garrisons or winter encampments. Their lives were incredibly tough. Isolation, cold, primitive living conditions. Some adapted, learning to survive, becoming stronger than the men. Others broke mentally, falling into hysteria, depression, and illness. Diaries kept by women travelers describe the horror, loneliness, and longing, but also the admiration for the raw beauty surrounding them and the pride of those who endured. Children born and raised in these environments were among the most resilient. From infancy, hardened by the cold, they were accustomed to movement, to the chill, to simple food. Child mortality was high. Many did not live past their first year, or even until age 5. Diseases, accidents, and the cold claimed the weak. The strongest survived, those who had adapted genetically and culturally. Training children in survival skills began early. Boys at age 5 or 6 learned to start fires, set traps, and manage dogs. Girls learned to sew clothing from animal hides, tan skins, cook, and care for younger siblings. By age 10, children were full-fledged helpers, ready for independent life, marriage, and building their own families. Elders in nomadic communities were respected as long as they could still contribute, sharing knowledge, experience, telling stories, and watching over the children. But when they became burdens, unable to move, needing care, harsh decisions were made. Some groups left the elderly to die alone. The elders would ask to be left behind, understanding that their presence slowed the group and threatened everyone's survival. They would say goodbye to their families, stay in the tent with a small supply of food and firewood, and wait for death, by cold, hunger, or their own hand. Though harsh by modern standards, it was logical in such conditions, where the group survival took precedence over the individual. Death in the taiga was common and unremarkable, not a taboo as it often is in civilized society. Bodies were buried if possible, under snow, beneath stones, in crevices, but often left out, freezing and preserved until spring. When predators thawed out and consumed the bodies, spiritual rituals were performed. Prayers, songs, and the belongings of the deceased were broken to release the spirit to the afterlife. Life then went on. Mourning was brief. There was no time for long grief. Survival demanded constant attention and action. During winter, the diet of nomadic peoples depended on hunting, reindeer herding, and stored supplies. Reindeer provided everything: meat, hides, bones, tendons, and fat. When a reindeer was killed, it was fully processed, nothing wasted. The meat was eaten fresh, dried, or frozen. Frozen meat could be stored for months, unspoiled, and cut into pieces as needed. Fresh, warm reindeer blood was drunk right at the slaughter site, rich in iron, protein, and vitamins. The taste was metallic and thick, but people got used to it. Europeans, witnessing this, were horrified. Yet after months in the north, they began to drink it themselves. The body demanded it. Instinct guided them. Bone marrow was considered a delicacy. Bones cracked and splintered as the flesh was torn away, the brain scraped clean, eaten raw or boiled. Fatty, calorie-rich, and flavorful, the meat was prized. The eyes, tongue, and brains of the animal were also highly valued, consumed first. Sliced cold from the freezer, frozen fish or meat cut into thin strips and eaten raw or frozen was a delicacy among northern peoples. Though unfamiliar to Europeans, it was nourishing, with a fresh taste, and required no cooking. Fish was caught in summer, preserved by drying, smoking, or freezing. During winter, it was eaten cooked, fried, or raw. If available, caviar was salted and stored in birch bark containers called tuis. Rich in calories and flavor, it kept well over time. Berries such as cloudberries, lingonberries, and cranberries were gathered in autumn and stored frozen, sometimes preserved in honey if in their own juice. These berries served as a vital source of vitamins during the winter months, helping to prevent scurvy. They were eaten by handfuls, brewed into berry drinks, or added to porridge. Mushrooms were dried for storage, then added to soups and stews, enriching the diet with variety. Protein, flavor, and nutritional diversity depended on these foods. Salt was an invaluable commodity, rare in the north, with supplies transported from afar and costing a high price. It was used sparingly, mainly for preserving meat and fish. Having fresh food for months was difficult. The body craved salt, but people endured or sought alternatives. Ash from certain plants contained salts, and if near the sea, seawater was another source. Tea was more than a beverage. It was a ritual, a tradition, a source of warmth, energy, and social connection. It was drunk by the liters, strong and often infused with fat, milk, or salt among nomadic tribes, or with sugar among Russians. The tea ceremony involved sitting around the fire, passing the cup in a circle, sharing conversations, and resting. It was a time when movement stopped, allowing people to relax and be human, not just survivalists. Despite the dangers, alcohol was consumed. Russians drank vodka, indigenous peoples brewed their own, and the English favored whiskey. In moderation, alcohol served as a social lubricant, providing warmth and a psychological boost. Taken in excess, it led to discipline breaking down, fights, accidents, and even death. Expeditions banned alcohol, or strictly limited it to about 50 grams per day during especially cold days, at the discretion of the commander. Nonetheless, these restrictions were often bypassed. Spirits were brewed and consumed secretly, and punishments were handed out if caught. Many smoked tobacco, pipes, or rolled cigarettes. Tobacco calmed nerves, distracted from hunger, cold, and fear. It was imported like salt, tea, and was highly valued. When tobacco was unavailable, dried plant leaves, bark, or any combustible material that produced smoke and created the illusion of smoking was used. Trade in the taiga continued throughout winter, despite harsh conditions. Trading posts and company outposts, where furs were bought and sold, operated year-round. Hunters brought in sable, fox, lynx, ermine, and otter pelts, exchanging them for supplies such as gunpowder, lead, knives, axes, cloth, sugar, tea, tobacco, and alcohol. Most exchanges were barter: sable pelts for sacks of flour, fox pelts for pounds of gunpowder. The system was known and relatively fair, though trading posts often inflated prices to their advantage. Hunters depended on these trading centers and accumulated debts. They bought goods on credit in the autumn, promising to pay back with pelts in winter. If hunting was poor, debts grew, and hunters could become trapped, working for years to settle their accounts. This exploitation was the harsh reality, but alternatives were scarce. Hunters needed tools and supplies they could not produce themselves.
Justice was local and community-based. A murderer, or someone caught committing a crime, was judged on the spot, usually executed or expelled into the wilderness without supplies. Death was postponed. Life was a constant struggle for survival. The criminals were punished publicly, beaten, branded, and expelled. The system was primitive and brutal, but it worked, maintaining order in the absence of a formal state. In winter, time was measured not by hours, but by light and events. Rising at dawn when the sky brightened, moving until midday for a rest, then traveling again until dusk. The journey paused at night for sleep. There were no clocks. People oriented themselves by the sun, moon, stars, or their inner sense of time. Precision was unnecessary. What mattered was the sequence of actions and the rhythm of the day. Weeks were counted by the phases of the moon, months by seasons and significant events. The month when the first snow fell, the month of deep cold, the month when days lengthened. Years were marked by memorable happenings rather than by the calendar. A year when a bear attacked, a year when the river froze early, a year of abundant hunting. Time flowed in cycles, repeating itself, not linearly as in modern times. The loneliness of European explorers, cut off from their homeland, culture, and language, was overwhelming. Letters home were written, folded, transported for weeks to the nearest post, sent off, and then took months to arrive, or sometimes never did. Sometimes, letters were lost, ships sank, postmen died. Connection to home was a ghostly link. Families became memories, intangible and unreal. Some forgot the faces of loved ones, their voices, remembering only the abstract idea of home. Returning after years in the taiga was a shocking reverse experience. Civilization felt noisy, frantic, meaningless. The warmth of houses was oppressive, food too complicated, people too talkative. Many couldn't adapt, felt like strangers, longing for the simplicity, silence, and clarity of the woods. Some went back into the forests, spending the rest of their lives there. Others stayed in the cities, but remained mentally connected to the wilderness, by the snowfields, around fires, beneath the stars. The romantic image of the northern taiga developed in the 10th century. Literature and paintings depicted its beauty, grandeur, and the heroism of conquering nature. But that was an outsider's perspective, from those who never truly lived there. The reality was simpler, rougher, more deadly. It was not heroism, but survival. Not conquest, but coexistence, adaptation, respect for the power of nature, which could only be endured, not defeated. Changes arrived slowly. At the end of the 10th century and into the beginning of the 20th, railways began connecting distant regions to centers. The telegraph provided quick, independent communication beyond the reach of postal couriers. Kerosene lamps and later electricity replaced candles and firebrands, bringing light. Canned food, mass-produced clothing, and gear made travel easier and safer. Yet, for a long time, until the middle of the 20th century, remote areas remained unchanged, living as they had 200 years earlier. Nomads kept following the herds of reindeer. Hunters ventured into the taiga for months. Winter encampments were built. Fires constantly kept burning. People slept in fur bags inside snow caves. Traditions, knowledge, and skills were passed from generation to generation, preserved because they worked, because they saved lives. Today, that way of life has almost disappeared. Technologies, globalization, climate change, and urbanization have transformed the North. But the memory remains in stories told by elders, in museums, in books, and in the genes of descendants of those who survived. Respect endures for those who not only survived, but lived, loved, bore children, laughed, sang, and created amid conditions that modern humans consider unbearable. The snow-covered forests of the 19th century were not merely places, but tests, teachers, and homes. They took the weak, tempered the strong, and taught humility, respect, mutual aid, and the preciousness of life. Every night spent in an icy tent, a snow cave, or a smoky burned chum was a victory. Each morning, waking up alive was a gift. We, sitting in warm houses with electricity, heating, food in refrigerators, communication with the world through screens, can only imagine, try to understand that life. But even imagining, even reading, even reflecting on it offers perspective. Gratitude for what we have, respect for the ancestors who endured it and passed down a world where survival is no longer the main concern each day. The story of journeys through snow-covered forests is a story of human endurance, ingenuity, and willpower. It is a lesson that humans can adapt to anything if necessary, that nature is stronger, but that humans are smarter, more flexible, capable of learning, changing, and surviving. Community, mutual aid, and traditions are more important than individual heroism, and respect for the environment, its laws, and its strength is not weakness, but wisdom. Today's extreme explorers, adventurers crossing the Arctic on skis, climbing mountains in winter, use technologies that make the impossible possible. Synthetic materials, GPS, satellite phones, freeze-dried food. Yet the principles remain the same: planning, preparation, respect for nature, readiness to suffer, and the will not to give up. They stand on the shoulders of those who did this 200 years ago, without any of these advantages, relying solely on knowledge, experience, and spirit. Perhaps some of you reading this will be inspired to try something similar: winter trekking, sleeping in the snow, building an igloo. If so, prepare thoroughly, learn from experts. Do not underestimate nature, but do it because such experiences transform you, give you insight into yourself, your limits, your capabilities, and connect you to ancestors, history, and nature on a level that cannot be achieved otherwise. For others, let this story be a reminder that the warmth of your home is not free. It is the result of millennia of development, struggle, and invention. The comfort we take for granted has been an unattainable luxury for most people throughout history. We live in an incredibly privileged time, and it is worth appreciating. The next time you feel cold, when heating isn't perfect, or you want to complain about the weather, think of those people in snow-covered forests 200 years ago, sleeping in icy tents, waking with frost on their eyelashes, lighting fires with frozen hands, walking dozens of kilometers through snow, unsure if they will make it until morning. Remember and smile, because you are fortunate. You have warmth, light, food, safety. Appreciate it, live it, and silently thank those who endured ice and snow's hell so that we might live in a world of warmth and comfort. There is another aspect of this life worth sharing: the psychological transformation that occurs after months of snowy isolation. This change is not always visible outwardly, but deeply affects character, worldview, and the very essence of a person. The first days in the taiga are full of anxiety, tension, constant vigilance. Every sound seems like a threat. Every shadow in the forest is a predator. Every gust of wind signals a storm. The brain works at its limit, releasing adrenaline, keeping the body in a state of perpetual readiness for danger. The sleep is shallow and interrupted. You wake at the slightest rustle. This is a normal reaction to the extreme environment, a survival mechanism inherited from ancestors. But after a week or two, something begins to change. The body adapts, accepting the new reality as normal. The cold no longer seems unbearable. It simply exists, like the air, like the sky. You learn to distinguish real threats from false alarms, to tell the sound of a falling branch from the crack of ice breaking beneath your feet. You become adept at reading tracks, spotting a wolf's paw print versus a fox's by the barely noticeable details. Perception sharpens. The senses start to pick up what they previously missed. You hear silence in a new way. It is not empty. It is full of barely perceptible sounds that tell the story of the forest. Your vision also changes. At first, the endless white space appears uniform and empty, but gradually you begin to see shades, dozens of tones of white, gray, and blue. You notice the texture of the snow, how it changes from place to place, revealing the influence of wind, temperature, and time since the last snowfall. You read the tracks as if they were pages in a book. Here, a hare hopped and stopped, startled by something, then ran faster and vanished into the thickets. There, a bear trudged heavily, dragging its paws, hungry and dangerous. A wolf pack passed in a chain, hunting unsuccessfully, moving on. Time takes on a different dimension. In the city, time is divided into hours, minutes, seconds, each moment accounted for and scheduled. In the wilderness, time flows like a river, continuous, without division. There are day and night, cycles of rising, movement, rest, and sleep. But within these cycles, time loses its rigidity. An hour can stretch into eternity when you walk against the wind through deep snow. A day can pass unnoticed when you're busy at a campfire, working on some task. This fluidity initially disorients, but then it frees you. There's no rush, no deadlines, only what must be done now. Start a fire, eat, move on, survive. Solitude transforms from enemy to ally. The first days of silence are heavy. You long to speak, to hear a voice, even your own. Some talk to themselves, to the dogs, to the trees, to the stars. This helps maintain a connection to humanity, to language. But over time, the need for words diminishes. Thoughts become quieter, simpler, more vivid. You think not in sentences, but in images, sensations, intuition. The inner dialogue fades, and in that silence the mind finds space, clarity, something impossible to find amid the noise of civilization. Hermits, monks, seekers of this silence, many of them sought it deliberately, retreating into deserts, mountains, forests. Travelers in the snowy taiga discover it not by choice, but out of necessity. Yet the effect is similar. Immersion in oneself, confrontation with one's true essence, stripped of masks, roles, and societal expectations. In the wilderness, pretense is useless. Nature does not care who you are, what your status is, what education you have. The only thing that matters is whether you can survive. This levels pride, humbles arrogance, teaches honesty with oneself. Many travelers have described moments of revelation, insight, and clarity during these periods. Decisions that seemed impossible to solve at home suddenly became obvious. Problems that once appeared enormous turned out to be petty and insignificant. Priorities realigned naturally. Survive. Help loved ones survive. Live with integrity. Die with dignity. All that remains is illusion, shells of what once was, a fleeting distraction filling people's lives, a distraction that masks the harsh truths beneath. Returning to civilization after such an ordeal was difficult not only physically, but also spiritually.
Cities seemed like a theater of absurdity, where everyone played roles, followed rules invented and rendered meaningless. Conversations about the weather, the news, gossip, or money felt hollow, superficial diversions from the real. The real was out there, in the forest, where each day was a battle, each night a test, each morning a gift. Some people could not reintegrate, becoming outcasts, strange, silent, distant. They drank to drown the longing for the clarity of the wilderness, or fled again for a year, 2, or for a lifetime. They became hermits, traders, loners living on the edge of civilization and wildness, never fully belonging to either. Others found a balance, using their experiences to live more consciously, to appreciate simple things, the warmth of home, the taste of bread, the laughter of children, the touch of a loved one. They understood how fragile life was, its preciousness. They didn't waste time on trivialities, but focused on what mattered, becoming quieter, calmer, wiser. People sensed this, felt drawn to them for advice, though the travelers themselves rarely spoke of their experiences. Words seemed inadequate, insufficient to convey what they had endured. There is a phenomenon that Arctic explorers called the Call of the North, or taiga. Someone who has spent a long time there feels an inexplicable pull to return, illogical, irrational. The endless cold, danger, deprivation do not attract reason, but something deeper than logic, a primitive instinct, ancestral memory encoded in the genes, beckons back. Dreams of white expanses, the northern lights. A silence so profound that you can hear a snowflake falling. Awakening with a sense of loss, longing for something unnameable. Writer Jack London, who spent a year in Alaska during the gold rush, felt this all his life. His stories are attempts to return there through words, to live again through his characters. Robert Service, the poet of Yukon, wrote about the strange spell of the Arctic that drives people mad. Many Russian writers exiled to Siberia returned there voluntarily after their release, unable to withstand civilization. This is not masochism, nor a desire to suffer. It is something else. Perhaps a craving for authenticity that only extremes can give. Or perhaps a need to feel truly alive when each day carries weight, meaning, consequences. Or maybe the raw, ruthless beauty of nature, untouched by man, unspoiled, wild. The northern lights seen by travelers during the polar night were described as a revelation, a mystical experience. The sky erupts with green, violet, red. Curtains of light sway, dance, pulse. It seems you could reach out and touch them, but that is an illusion. The aurora is high in the upper layers of the atmosphere. Absolute silence reigns. Only occasionally, as some say, can one hear a gentle rustling, a whisper as if the sky itself is breathing. Science explains this as the result of solar wind, magnetic fields, and ions. But science cannot convey the sensation. Standing on a frozen river, gazing upward, witnessing this cosmic symphony of light, feeling tiny, insignificant, yet part of something grand, eternal, incomprehensible. On a clear, frosty night deep in the taiga, the stars are visible like never in the city. There is no light pollution. The air is dry and transparent. The cold clears away the fog. The Milky Way stretches across the entire sky like a broad river of starry dust. Constellations are bright and sharp. Thousands of stars can be seen with the naked eye. Lying in the snow, wrapped in furs, looking upward, boundaries begin to blur. Where you end and the cosmos begins is unclear. You can feel the rotation of the Earth, its movement through space not with the intellect, but with your whole being. These moments are rare, precious. When the cold recedes, your stomach is full, danger feels far away, and there's time just to be. They stay in memory brighter than all hardships. Perhaps it is for these moments that people return, not for the trials, but for these glimpses of the transcendent that are inaccessible in everyday life, hidden behind layers of comfort, distractions, and busyness. The last thing worth mentioning are the lessons that life in such conditions teaches, lessons that remain relevant today, despite all the changes. The first lesson is respect for nature. Not a romantic admiration, but a sober understanding of its power, its indifference to humans, and the impossibility of control. Modern civilization has created an illusion of mastery over nature. We heat our homes, cool the air, light up the night, fly across continents. But it's only an illusion, fragile and fleeting. One catastrophe, one failure, and nature reasserts itself, reminding us who is truly in charge. The second lesson is the value of simplicity. The fewer possessions you have, the fewer worries you carry. A traveler with a single bag, an axe, and some fire-starting material is freer than someone burdened with tons of gear. What's truly necessary is warmth, food, water, shelter, and weapons. Everything else is luxury, and often a hindrance. The modern world convinces us that happiness comes from accumulating things, experiences, impressions. But perhaps real happiness lies in the ability to get by with less, in freeing oneself from excess and focusing on what truly matters. The third lesson is interdependence, community. No one survives in the taiga completely alone for long. Even loners depend on a chain of people. Hunters who leave the winter encampment, traders bringing supplies, indigenous peoples sharing their knowledge. Modern individualism, the cult of self-sufficiency, ignores this reality. We are all connected, dependent on each other, strong only together. The pandemic reminded us of this, but the lesson is quickly forgotten. The fourth lesson is humility before the inevitable, acceptance of death. In the taiga, death is always nearby. You can die today, tomorrow, in an hour. Fear can paralyze, but acceptance frees you. It's not fatalism or giving up the fight, but a calm acknowledgement. Yes, I might die, but as long as I live, I will do what I must, live as best I can, without wasting energy on fear. Modern culture denies death, hides it, creating an illusion of immortality through medicine and technology. But death is unavoidable, and accepting it makes life fuller, more conscious, more valuable. The fifth lesson is willpower, discipline, routines. Survival demands action, even when you don't want to, when it hurts or frightens you. Rising in the cold, starting a fire, moving forward when your legs give out. This is not heroism, it's discipline. Motivation comes and goes, discipline remains. Routine may be dull, but it's reliable. Modern society promises ease, comfort, instant gratification. But true resilience lies in the strength to endure, to persevere when everything else seems to falter, to keep going despite the pain. These lessons, learned in the harshness of nature, are timeless and vital, reminding us of who we are and what we are capable of when faced with the raw truth of life and death. But everything worth achieving requires effort, repetition, and overcoming obstacles. This lesson is ancient, yet forgotten, and it's worth remembering. Perhaps that's why stories of journeys into extreme environments draw us in, not because we want to suffer, but because we instinctively feel that out there, in the cold, in danger, in the struggle for survival, there is something real, something we have lost in comfort. A certain truth about human nature, about who we truly are when all masks, conveniences, and pretenses are stripped away. We cannot and should not return to that life. Progress has given us so much good. Medicine, education, safety, opportunities. But we can remember, learn, and integrate these lessons. We can appreciate warmth more, knowing what it's like without it. We can simplify our lives, shedding excess burdens. We can be grateful for each day, understanding that it is not guaranteed. We can help one another, recognizing that in that lies our strength. We can develop willpower, discipline, and readiness to face hardships, knowing that soft living makes soft people, and difficult times, times that will come, and always do, call for strength. So, we have traveled together through snow-covered forests of the 19th century, through cold, danger, and trials, through nights in icy tents and days in endless white emptiness. We met traders, hunters, nomads, explorers. We learned how they dressed, ate, built shelters, fought the cold, frostbite, diseases, predators. We saw their strength, their weakness, heroism, fear, and transformation. Now, returning to the warmth of your home, to the softness of your bed, to the light of your screen, you know a little more about how people lived then, how they survived, what they felt. And perhaps this knowledge will change something in you, make you more grateful, stronger, wiser. Look around. You are in warmth. You have a roof, walls that protect you from the wind. You have food, accessible without risking your life. You have light at the push of a button. You have connection with the world, with loved ones. All of this is a miracle. The result of thousands of years of development, the labor of millions. Do not take it for granted. Cherish it. Live consciously. Help others, and be grateful. And when you lie down tonight under a warm blanket, in safety, remember for a moment those people in snowy forests, falling asleep in the cold, unsure if they will wake. Remember their courage, endurance, humanity amid inhuman conditions. Send them a mental thank you, respect, and remembrance. They were just like us, but living in a different time. They endured what we, I hope, will never have to experience. Now, close your eyes, release the tension of the day, feel the warmth, safety, and comfort. Breathe deeply, calmly. May your dreams be warm, peaceful, and kind. May you wake up in the morning rested, grateful for a new day, for warmth, for life. Good night, sleep tight, and let the warmth of your home remind you of how fortunate we all are to live here and now. Thanks for watching Lectures Under the Moon. Don't forget to like and subscribe.